Kochi for the last 15 years, and we are initiating a series of conversations related to contemporary politics, contemporary economics, global politics in the weeks to come. And this is the first one in the series of conversations. We are going on live on webinar on Facebook, on YouTube today. And thanks for accepting our invitation and joining us for this dialogue on Kerala economy and how to secure our livelihoods during the COVID time. I am Dhanu Raj, Chairman Center for Public Policy Research, and I'm joined by Dr. Martin Patrick, well-known economist and also the Chief Economist of Center for Public Policy Research. Welcome you, sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good morning to everybody.
Sir, today's topic is on COVID economy, especially on the livelihood issues and the various challenges that people are facing during this time, during this pandemic. So I would like to start this conversation by asking the question, asking about the history of pandemics, epidemics, and how has been the response from various governments all these years. In the last 100 years, many say that this is one among the this happens once in 100 years. This pandemic happens in once in 100 years. But we also had pandemics and epidemics reported from various parts of the world. So I would like to get your response and reaction on how has been the history of pandemics, what has been the response of different governments whenever the epidemics like this occurred, and what are the things that we have to learn from those historical experiences, sir?
In fact, historical data do not support that it happens in once in 100 years. In fact, the last pandemic occurred in 2009, and before that it was in 1968, and before that it was in 1957. Now, what we witness now, after 2009, in between the present pandemic and the last pandemic, there were a number of epidemics. And the last one, the 2009, is the famous H1N1 pandemic. And that killed almost 2 lakh people, more than 2 lakh people. But I would like to compare the present crisis with the Spanish flu that occurred in 1980, continued till 1920. In fact, it started in United States and spread all over the world. And there were a number of reports regarding this Spanish flu. One important report shows that that led to the death of 10 crores people in the world, 5 to 10 crores. And we lost 18 million's life as far as India is concerned. That was a big shock to the Indian economy, as well as to the United States and almost all parts of Europe. And I would like to compare, always like to compare the present crisis with the Spanish flu. One important point that you have to note that there will be number of waves in a pandemic. In fact, the first wave is going on as far as India is concerned. There is every possibility that there may be second waves and third waves. In almost all pandemics, you can witness at least 3 waves, so that you are not in a position to evaluate the consequences of the current pandemic. It's premature to say something about the current pandemic. However, there were some estimates regarding the economic consequence of the previous pandemics. Even the first authentic one was reported in 1342, now popularly known as Black Death. That was followed by a number of pandemics. And during the earlier periods, it was argued that it always happens once in 100 years. But later, this time span got reduced. Now you can see that every 30 years, to 20 to 30 years, this pandemic is occurring in the world. And as far as the economic consequence is concerned, the Spanish flu was studied well by economists, the medical practitioners, etc. And it was pointed out that at that time, the world lost almost 500 US dollar billion every year. It continued. I told you that it prolonged for 3 years. And there was a loss of 500 billion US dollars loss during that time. In relative terms, it was 0.6% of the global income at that time. Now you know that. Currently, IMF argues that your global income will be reduced to the extent of 2 to 3%. There is a probability that you may witness a negative growth rate. And in India, everywhere there will be a fall in the growth rate. Again, I repeat the point that it's premature to argue that this will be the actual fall in the GDP. As far as the earlier estimates are concerned, it varies from country to country. Lower income countries faced a loss of almost 1.6 to 2% loss in the GDP. 1.6 to 2% at that time during the Spanish flu period. Whereas in the case of the advanced countries, this loss was only 0.3%. I don't think that there were wonderful and scientific studies in looking into the economic consequences of all pandemics. But Spanish flu was studied very much by economists as well as the medical practitioners. Now, currently, I feel that this pandemic will create a lot of loss, economic consequences to the world as a whole. So, are you hearing?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
In this context, let me stop here, and I would like to ask a question to you. What is your expectation regarding the economic consequence of this current pandemic on the national economy as well as on the Kerala economy?
Sir, I think, when this government came to power, the second time, they started with this, the very, I would say, very adventurous statement or adventurous claim that, India is going to become a $5 trillion US economy. And all of us were debating it, even before pandemic, that whether we can achieve $5 trillion US economy for a country like India in the next 5 years. So now today, I believe, the picture is very clear. We are not going to have that 5 trillion, not even that 3.5 trillion US economy that we have now. I would, I was going through various studies conducted commissioned by various agencies, and most of the studies are saying every day we are losing around 35,000 crores to 45,000 crores. So that means since the lockdown, in the last 50 days, till Monday, if we are not going to extend lockdown national across the country as we are doing now, I think the cumulative loss would be around some 22 lakh crore. It could vary if there could be a partial lockdown. I understand many of the state governments wanted to extend the lockdown. There could be some relaxations, but the problem right now is, I think out of 630 districts in the country, we have around 300 districts which they are yet to report any single case of COVID. There are around 100 out districts which has got 10 to 15 cases reported. So these two clusters, I would say around 500 and 50 districts, which are, I would say, relatively free from COVID-19. I was also reading one of the news reports today morning that the COVID reported in the rural area of the country is only 15%. But the problem here is, from an urban perspective and also from the rural perspective, I believe there's a huge impact on Indian economy. There is going to be a huge impact on Indian economy for the next few years, in fact. The reason is 60% of our wealth, GDP, was contributed by urban areas in the country. So now, barring those 500 districts, still we have few districts that are declared as hotspots in the country. And there are 33 districts, as far as I'm just quoting what Niti Aayog mentioned the other day. There are 33 districts, and these 33 districts have got all the 10 million population cities in the country. Chennai, Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, Hyderabad, Calcutta are all declared as red zones. So they are all in the red zones. So the issue now is whatever economic activity you're expecting, these cities are the economic engines for the country. So we can lift the lockdown in rest of the country, but as long as these cities are not coming to the normal, the routine work, I'm very much skeptical about the growth that many are predicting now. IMF yesterday, Dr. Gobinath was saying she expects India to grow, actually for this year she says 0.5%. Next year she says 1.9%. There are also economists in the country, they challenged Geeta Gobinath's numbers. But I believe this could be in between that, between 1% or 2.5%. So this could be, it will take a lot of time for us to recover from this thing. And also the migrant population, they have gone back to the work. And most of the sectors, most of the growth engines, the sectors which contribute to the economic growth of the country, they're all shut down. All the cities are shut down. So people have lost job. And we are also linked to the global economy. So when America is not doing well, when Europe is not doing well, and when Middle East is not doing well, I'm sure we are going to suffer from that. Obviously, our exports was not growing in the last few years, but in the last quarter, just before the COVID, there was actually a positive growth of exports. So whatever gains that we had in the last 6 months, I think with the COVID, that is over. So it will take a lot of time, the social distancing, 50% employment. I don't think that is going to increase the productivity. But another thing could be due to the impact of COVID and also the social distancing that we are talking about. There is also a possibility that introduction of new technologies that will also lead to some job losses eventually. Probably manpower will be replaced by the machines. So in a nutshell, I can go in detail for each sector, but I think we are in a bad shape. We have to accept that, and the counter measures would be government has to release money. Government has to announce few more packages so that the money and ensure that the money goes to the pockets of the poor and the poorest in the country. And what are mechanisms we can have? How do you manage the supply chain? And in a federal structure, the supply chain and the robustness of the distribution, a lot depends on the state governments also. So it's a combination of state governments and central government working together to ensure the money goes to the people who lost their livelihood. The middle class and upper middle class, probably they could still wait and watch. They will have some savings. I'm sure they're going to spend from those, but millions, I think a country where we have 80% of the economy still in the informal sector, a lot of people cross their borders and work in other cities, other states. In a state like Kerala, they're all going back. So it is going to take a lot of time for them to come back. And as long as there is a insecurity feeling in terms of infection, in terms of disease that will be spread out, I don't think people will go back to work. So that's a take on national scene. Probably I can answer a few specific. I could see some of them. But before that, sir, I would like to see your take on Kerala economy, and because we are going to talk about Kerala economy and how Kerala is going to be affected by COVID-19.
Okay, thank you, Danu. Danu, I am broadly agreeing with your viewpoint. There is a good estimate done by two statistician and economist, which shows that suppose you work out the loss on the basis of the GDP, the one-day loss will be around 1.15 lakh crore. If so, you consider the 40 days.
35,000 crores, sir. Not
40,000 crores. According to that estimate, using a statistical model they worked out, it's a good model.
Okay.
If you depend on that estimate, the loss will be around 23% of the national income. The loss will be 40 days loss will be. I'm talking about the lockdown period only. Right. You extend the same to Kerala economy, minimum you will have a loss of 23% of SDP, minimum. That will be beyond that. Okay. Why? Because Kerala is largely depending upon the service sector, you know, that which contributes 62% of the SDP. Unlike the national economy where 52% of the GDP is contributed by the service sector. A more dominant role is played by service sector in the Kerala economy. So Kerala economy, in Kerala economy, almost all sectors are in standstill everywhere, every part of the world, now except China. That's the story. But in Kerala, I think that you will have to pay more for this pandemic. Okay. Pandemic. Why? Because you are heavily depending upon the NRI remittances. And there is a huge return of foreign Keralites, the Kerala, non-residents of Keralites from Gulf countries and other parts of the world. Naturally, we will be having huge loss in the case of the what is called the income. The income loss is actually a problem everywhere, income loss. The two important things that you can highlight, one is income loss, the other is a fall in the consumption. And these are actually applicable everywhere, applicable to every part of the world. Kerala is more prone to this problem. Why? Again, because it's a consumer state. It's a consumer state where you are spending a lot, but you are not getting adequate income to spend. That will naturally affect the Kerala economy. And there is every possibility that the 7.5% growth rate that you witnessed last year will not be maintained at any cost. Whether it will be 2%, as you said, in the case of the national economy, or less than that. Right. I told you that it is premature to talk about that, whether this growth should be 2% or 1.5%, because when you compare with the Spanish flu or other pandemics, whenever you have less impact during the first wave of the pandemic, the second wave will create a lot of damage to that place. And if you have more severity as far as this problem is concerned, the chances of damaging that economy will be less during the second wave and third wave. This is the pattern that we are witnessing. So Kerala should be very cautious because we have contained.
Right.
And there is a possibility that there may be high casualty during the second wave and the third wave of the pandemic. So at this stage, I'm worried about really the performance of all sectors. Even after 40 days, I don't think that your whole sector will be will start to produce the goods and services, and you cannot expect a wonderful growth in the economy. So livelihood is affected. Everywhere livelihood is affected. As far as the people of Kerala are concerned, sure that everywhere in Kerala, as well as other parts of state, the percentage of population depending on the is very high. So their livelihood will be affected. You are talking about the organized sector, the organized people who are getting reasonable income. Even when there is a salary cut, even when there is a deferment of the salary, there is a guaranteed income. What about these poor people working in the informal sector? Also, the informal laborers working in the formal sector too. That's another interesting point that we are often missing. In fact, since 1990 onwards, what I have noticed in the case of India as well as Kerala, the informal laborers or the unorganized laborers working in the formal sector is on increase. That we are continuously neglecting.
Sir, can I interrupt in between, sir? I have a figure that is, in fact, one of our research interns, Nila Nair, has come up with these numbers yesterday. She actually took it from the government, various government sources. So she says around 14.2 lakh is the people. I mean, that's a number that is into the formal sector of Kerala, and out of that, 5.6 lakh is working with the government. And rest around 6.4 lakh is working with the private sector. That's formal private sector, sir. So I have an issue with that. I mean, I'm not an issue with the numbers, but when we'll be discussing this all debate on what is formal and informal in Kerala and what are the sectors who are going to be affected by this pandemic, do we have numbers? I mean, exact numbers with the government also, a state government like the government of Kerala, to look into the sectors which are going to be affected most and who are the vulnerable sections who are going to be affected most. Because the number says 14 lakhs. We have around probably 90 lakh households, 80 to 90 lakh households in Kerala, and probably we have around some 70 lakh students are there. So then there are so many NRIs, I mean, so many of us, I mean, our friends or relatives are working abroad. So that means, and also we have, the latest study shows that around 30 lakhs people are working here as migrant labor. So it's slightly confusing when I look at these numbers, because one side they are saying 14 lakh in formal sector, then there is another 40 lakh in migrant labor. Then we have so many are in informal sector also. And sir, you are saying so many informal sector employees started working in the formal sector. So how is it going to evolve post COVID time, sir?
It's a very delicate question. Why? Because always the estimation of informal labor is a Herculean task. You have no clear statistical data regarding the informal laborers. Even at national level, it was done in the year 2008. After that, there is no proper estimation, Again, coming to your second problem, sector-wise estimation of informal laborer, I don't think that there is reliable information regarding that. But we know that there are some estimates regarding that. The most affected sector due to this pandemic is tourism. There is no doubt about that. And the tourism sector, suppose there are 1.5 million people are depending on that sector. Definitely, you can identify the number of enterprises operating in that area. You have statistics with the Kerala Tourism Development Council. Then exclude that number of entrepreneurs from that, you will get a figure about the workers. And you can clearly develop a model for addressing their livelihood. But what is more important that the informal sector is not confined to tourism alone. In Kerala, the tourism contributes 10% of the SDP, but retail, repairs, and hotels and restaurants, that is the one important subsector, which contributes about 15 to 16% of the SDP. And retail sector is actually one sector which has been affected adversely due to this pandemic. Another, you barring the tourism sector. So definitely there should be some packages for
I'm sure,
securing the livelihoods of people.
sir,
Yes.
I also try to bring your attention to the transport sector. Hundred thousands of people who drive auto rickshaws, those who work in the private buses, other than the KSRTC, of course, is part of the government employment. So transport also plays a major role, sir, because transport, the need for commuting today is a challenge. I mean, why should, because by law, you are not expected to commute at this point of time. Second thing is, I think the transport sector was depending quite a lot on the service sector because people commute for various needs other than the daily routine. So do you think that the transport sector is also playing major role in?
Exactly, I was coming to that. After the retail repairs and hotels and restaurant, then comes the tourism, then comes the transport, then one more, very important, banking and financial sector.
Okay.
That is also playing a very crucial role in Kerala economy. All these four sectors you have to consider. Transport is very crucial. Why? Because there are a lot of informal players. Informal players, auto rickshaw people, the private buses people, where a large number of people are accommodated. Naturally, we have to address their problems. But one more important issue that the sector, which is normally called the small scale sector, tiny and small scale sector. National level, you can say that MSMEs. But in Kerala, I will say that micro and small enterprises play a crucial role. Entrepreneurs are suffering a lot. You should not talk about the laborers alone. Small entrepreneurs are suffering from working capital problem, and they are suffering from what is called the income loss, and hence we have to compensate them. That is also another important problem. If you want to address the problem of, if you want to secure the livelihood of people, don't ignore the small entrepreneurs. They are doing good job in the retail sector, in transport sector, in banking sector, in manufacturing sector. Manufacturing sector where the small entrepreneurs are playing a very good role, a dynamic role, I will say that. And hence, you have to address the problems of these poor people who can be addressed as the laborers working in the informal sector as well as in the formal sector. Then the small entrepreneurs, broadly, all the people that you are talking about can be brought under the category of informal laborers. Informal laborers plus small entrepreneurs. This should be the policy of the government. Otherwise, you cannot secure the livelihood of the people during the COVID period and even during the post-COVID period. Dhanu, I would like to get your thinking about the performance of certain sectors, particularly tourism I mentioned, but you will have a lot of aspects regarding the tourism sector. I know that you have studied about the tourism sector. Then two more important sector, health and education, that I didn't mention deliberately because you have something to talk about these three sectors. What is your comment about the impact of this pandemic on these sectors?
So tourism sector globally it is affected. I don't expect tourists coming to Kerala in the immediate future. This is not because of COVID alone. I think for the last 3 years, after Oki, then two floods, and then we had Nympha. I think globally, even though government of Kerala says there was a surge in tourist arrival in the last few months, I still believe we were not doing good because we have some issues with the accounting of the numbers because we also did a paper on this thing. There's some issues with the number of tourists coming to Kerala because how do we account them? We used to get around 1 crore tourists, and out of that, around 89 to 90 lakhs were domestic tourists. That means we were not doing so great in the international tourism circuit, even though we claim we are doing very good. And also, one of the studies we have conducted shows that on an average, the spending of tourists coming to Kerala is less than the money that they spend. That kind of tourists that Rajasthan is getting, the kind of tourists Mumbai is getting, or the kind of tourists UP is getting, thanks to Taj Mahal there. Our tourists are, I would say, they're not the poor tourists, but when you compare it, they spend less in Kerala, or we are not able to bring high propensity value tourists to Kerala in the last many years. I mean, that's not because of last 3 years, that is there. Historically, that is the way we are looking at. Even though tourism policy of government says that we want less tourists but high spending tourists. But what is happening really is we are getting more tourists, but they spend less in a state like Kerala. The problem with the tourist sector is 65% of our economy, state GSTP, that is accounted by tourism sector alone. That is accounted by service sector. And tourism plays, as Steve said, sir, 10%. But if you add other transportation, then if you add hospitality sector, meaning hotels, restaurants, everything, then it becomes like around 40 to 50% of the service sector. And I think one of the sectors that was steadily growing in Kerala for the last so many years was the restaurants and bakeries. We had, I think some studies showed that we had an annual growth of 40%. Every nook and corner of Kerala, we could see hotels and restaurants mushrooming.
People used to eat always.
And we also have, thanks to remittance and also the savings that we have, we used to go out and eat. Now, there are two issues there. One, many of these restaurants were served by the migrant laborers, and they are all returning. Some of the majority have already left Kerala. So the question here is how many restaurants are ready to open now, even if the lockdown is lifted. As long as local Malayalis are ready, it's a good opportunity for the local Malayalis to get into this job. That is another question I want to ask you, sir, later after completing this. What about the local job opportunities that we could think of? And regarding health and education, I think we have majority of the beds in private sector for historically also. I mean, we are doing excellently well in public sector, even though there are, in health sector assets, we still have to do a lot better. But I think compared to the rest of the country, we are doing well. That is also one of the reasons I believe we are able to contain this virus to a great extent in Kerala. Two things would happen now. One, I would even argue that the nurses who are working abroad, there's a huge demand for nurses abroad, and now I'm sure a lot of focus will be on health sector, and these nurses were giving a lot of money as a remittance money to Kerala. And many of our doctors and health workers in Kerala, those who are working in the Kerala-based hospitals, I think we have a problem there because only in the recent times we set this minimum wage for nurses and all. I had some disagreement that time on some of the things that the government is doing. But I think this will be a copy not only in health, I think across board.
all about because the minimum wage, because one study that I read last week talks about Kerala's minimum wage is around 200 percentage to national, on an average, the minimum wage that we see across the country. Okay. Okay. So 20% of the population is elderly. So they have, and we are also notorious for some of the the non-communicable diseases that we have. I mean, we are capital to many of the things. So I strongly believe many of the hospitals may find nursing homes, I would say, because one of the missing element when we discuss health sector in Kerala is the small and medium level hospitals. I would say medium scale hospitals. I call them as nursing homes, 0 bed to 20 beds. That's a size, and doctor would be the manager, owner. He's also helping them. There'll be one or two nurses to help him, assist him, and they may suffer because if people are not going there, thinking that these hospitals are not secured enough to go there, then people will not go. They will go to only to the established hospitals and to the public hospitals, of course. Then I don't know what is going to happen to them because they are running on a daily basis. I mean, they get money from the patients and they spend and they give small amount of salary to the nurses there. Regarding education, I don't know how are we going to do the social distancing. I am not so sure about. Still don't know how we conduct this 10th standard exams and 12th standard exams. Given the situation there, how students will be able to write their exams, or I don't know whether we have got any alternative in case if we cancel this exam. But regarding the appointments of teachers, I am sure at least some of the unaided schools and some of the aided schools have learned the art of online teaching by this time. And I'm not surprised if the managements of some of these schools decide not to appoint, not to retrench anybody who is working there, but not to appoint anybody at least for some time, because I'm sure the more we sit at home and the more we ask students to learn online, and more we have online companies, education companies coming offering these courses, I'm sure a state like Kerala, because Kerala has got, compared to the rest of the country, I'm not saying we are the best in the country or best in the world, but I think internet penetration, smartphone penetration, broadband connectivity, Kerala is one among the three states in the country which has got high penetration of internet and usage of internet. So that could also help online learning. So that could probably lead to retrenchment of no appointments in the immediate future. So that could, and teachers are actually huge workforce in a state like Kerala. 13,000 schools, some good number of colleges, so everybody is looking for jobs in teaching sector. So I believe that is going to affect. They are going to work from home, so that is going to change the real estate equations in the country. I think many cities are there because, for historical reasons, of course, we have cities, but I think the recent addition to the cities, list of cities in India, happened because the high towers and the big infrastructure developments and for the real estate growth there in the city. So when a company like TCS says 75% of their employees are going to work from home, I'm sure most of the companies are going to follow suit. And I don't know, even in a state like Kerala, we have techno parks, we have info parks. I don't know how many companies are going to ask their employees to stay back and they work from home, and whether if that is going to be the new normal, I think that is going to change the narrative of urbanization in the country. I believe that is going to change the outlook that many of the
the urban planners had in the past, in the recent times, about how to develop new cities and all. Real estate could be one factor. Second could be the transportation. I'm not so sure whether this public transport, we are all champions of public transport. At the same time, there is a reality now, that could be infectious. This could be very infectious if you take the public transport mode. So when the public transport is not so supportive enough to take your people to the workplace, especially those people who are working as maids, housemates, the lower strata of the employment. If they are not able to commute, then that is also going to affect your urbanization, because I believe the informal sector in our cities are they're the backbone. That's the reason the cities are thriving in India. So if they are hit, I'm sure again there is going to be a narrative change the way we are looking at. Third factor is, I think, thanks to lockdown, somebody was saying from Jalandhar you could see Himalaya. Somebody was saying, Delhi has got a blue sky. I don't know when next time winter, God forbid, the COVID is over. I mean, COVID is not going to create much trouble for us. Even then, the pollution could be a problem. So I'm actually wondering, we tried out many things in a city like Delhi. I don't know whether we banned the firecrackers during Diwali times, whether government is going to say that, come on, for next 10 days, we are going to have only 50% of your employees. We are going to allow only 50% of your employees going to work from offices. And these are some propositions. I don't know what is going to happen. But if that is the case, I'm sure most of the companies may withdraw their workforce from these cities, because they say there is a lot of uncertainty in this. I strongly believe I probably should be able to give a better answer. I'm working on this thing, whether flattening of COVID curve, whether we could expect flattening of urbanization in India from a different perspective. So that is my take on this. And there is a question by Sri Kumar Raghavan. He's asking what kind of stimulus would be required.
Okay.
He's asking about, there are a couple of questions, what kind of stimulus required for Kerala, not about, they're not asking about government of India's stimulus packages, what are the stimulus packages we need in Kerala. And one more question related to that is, whether do we have the numbers? I think I also asked the same, do we have the numbers to target them in Kerala?
In fact, we have announced 20,000 crores by way of a stimulus package. And the central government has announced 1.7 crore. And all these amounts are not sufficient to meet the problem. We have what we require at this juncture. Normally, this pandemic situation is compared with the wartime situation. So during the wartime period, we went for aggressive spending, direct aggressive spending. Unless we go with that strategy, definitely our economy will be back with even 5% growth rate or 4% growth rate. So the urgent need for the national economy as well as for the Kerala economy is that you have to spend a lot of money by way of direct cash transfer so that poor people's purchasing power will go up. I think that Kerala state is thinking in that direction, but the problem is they are constrained by money. They are constrained by money.
Can I interrupt in between? Sir, there is one more concern that many of them are sharing. I mean, including me also. I also shared this concern a few days back. I think most of the announcements by CM in the last few days were more or less focusing on agriculture sector. I mean, I'm not sure saying that he's not interested in other sectors, but there is a concern that he is not addressing, not he, I mean, government of Kerala is not addressing the service sector as such. Some of the issues that we had discussed earlier in this conversation. So what do you think about that?
No, that is true. Because as far as the service sector is concerned, we do not have much problem. Definitely, you will have good performance of service sector even in the coming years. But at the same time, as I told you earlier, both for the service sector and manufacturing sector, a package should be announced for small entrepreneurs. If you are able to announce a good package for them, definitely you need not worry about the service sector. Service sector will be easily picked up. But that is not the problem of agriculture sector. It's a great concern for the state economy. Because even for food grains, you are depending on your neighboring states. Now the government is thinking that at least if you are able to cultivate an adequate quantity of vegetables in the state itself, that will be a great relief. And in that direction we are thinking, but as far as the announcements made by CM relating to the development of agriculture sector is not the new one. It's again the pretty old one. We have been facing the problems of agriculture sector for the last number of 1 or 2, 3 decades. We have been facing the same problem. Definitely it is good if you are able to revamp the agriculture economy so that you need not depend on the neighboring states for food grains in future. That will be a blessing. I don't know how they will be able to work out this. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years are not sufficient for revamping the agriculture sector. But as you said, definitely, at any cost, we have to maintain the contribution made by the service sector. That should be continued. One problem with the service sector is that whether it is sustainable. Without the sufficient growth, without a sufficient growth in the agriculture and industrial sector, whether this will be sustainable, this kind of model will be sustainable for addressing the problems of the Kerala economy. That is the reason why we have recognized the fundamental problem of the economy. The fundamental problem lies in the weak performance of the productive sector. So it is necessary that you have to revamp the agriculture sector. You cannot wait more. This is the right time. Every time when a crisis occurs, you are saying that opportunity, but the opportunity is not being reaped properly. This time I hope that the government will come back with suitable policies to revamp the agriculture sector along with the development of the manufacturing sector. Otherwise, you will face a lot of problems. Should I come back to the migrant issues?
Sir, one more thing, adding to that, there is one question by Abhishek Das. He's asking how to cater the livelihood issues for the migrant workers in Kerala after COVID-19.
We are doing it well. As compared to any other states, any other country, we are doing well. You know that our social kitchen we are talking about, right? That is doing well, and we are meeting their food needs. Definitely food needs with the help of these kind of kitchens. But I think that in future, after this COVID or after the lockdown, they will be going back to their states. Every chance that they will be going back to the state. After taking a break, again they will join the employment sector. By that time, definitely we can address their problems. And I also ambitiously waiting for replacing these interstate migrants by our returning Malayalis from Gulf countries and also our so-called unemployed laborers in the state economy. This is the area where we have to look into. Suitable models should be developed. Suitable policies should be worked out by the policy makers. You are also responsible for that. Your institution can do a lot, I think. You're hearing?
Yes, sir. So can I take another question, sir?
Yes.
What is the impact of religious institutions? What is the impact on religious institutions like old age homes, charity organizations, churches, temples? I'm sure. I would like to add from my end. I think churches, temples, all these religious institutions play a major role in state economy. They also contribute quite a lot. So then the other set is old age homes and charity organizations. Would they be affected? This is one question from Jason and Anthony.
No doubt they will continue to play a dynamic role. The same role will be played by them. There is no doubt about it.
So you're saying that there won't be a change in the people's worshipping habits, sir? They're still going.
Definitely, you can add. Then definitely you can add your points in this case. After that, I will.
I was looking at the Devasam board, for example. That's a state institution, sir. So the money, if the money that is going to the temples, if it is not, then how these institutions are going to survive, because they depend a lot on the temple economy, and also I'm also told by some others. I mean, not from Kerala. Some of the big temples like Kashi Vishwanath, Tirupati, then I think Ahmedabad. That in Odisha, Cuttack one. They're all planning to do the online. They're trying to do their online facilities. So what is going to happen is, what my understanding so far is, it is going to be a subscription-based model. So if you want a darshan directly, you have to pay this much amount of money, even though it is not in the public. That is there in the rounds of discussion. I think they are going to do that. But when I talk this thing to many of my friends who are into the religious, academic research on religious matters in India, I think they're also doubting how can we change the practices all of a sudden like that, and how is going to have a change. So it is not only about economy. I think it's also going to have a socio-economic impact, socio-economic cultural impact on our people.
Definitely, this problem has to be studied well. In coming years, there will be a lot of studies, but I think that the mode of operations may get changed. And it is not wise to talk about the business model of the pilgrims aspect. But the mode of operation there may be changes in the business model or mode of operations.
We don't say it is a business model.
This religious institution will continue to play a good role. Why? Because, for example, in the case of Kerala, churches have a lot of educational institutions and health institutions.
Right.
And we have certain other religions to have. They will definitely run all these institutions. And they will be contributing. They are contributing a sizable amount to the total value addition in the health sector and education sector. That will be continued here. And the way of worship, I'm not able to state that. There may be changes, but in India, I don't think that there will be much changes or dynamic changes, even in that case.
Okay. Sir, another question. I'm trying to run through these questions asked by your participants. One is about the petrol and diesel price. So, Aishwarya is asking, can India make use of the reduced petrol price in this situation, or we need to wait till the economy is back on track? Do we have enough storage capacity for crude oil? I think second part I think we are going to build a few more storage capacities from a strategic point of view. But what do you think about the petrol prices? Sir, I mean,
The petrol prices are quite low in the international market. But we are with the high prices. Very high prices we are charging. And as far as the central government is concerned, they are very lucky that always they are getting the benefit of reduced prices of petrol or crude oil in the international market. That is one of the benefits they are getting. But Kerala is concerned whether they will reduce the prices of excise, they will reduce the excise duty, or any other part of the fall in the price will be shifted to the people or the consumers. I don't think that unless the central government reduce the prices, the state government can do something there. One major point is that your volume of crude oil imported has come down. In India, it is estimated that the 40% of the demand is shrink. This is the problem of India. And second point is that there is a reduction in the import bill due to the fall in the international prices. These two things are advantages for India. The first is not an advantage from the viewpoint of an economist. Why? Because there should be always increase in the demand for petrol. As you said, we have the storage capacity. But one more problem we are facing now. Your exchange rate is mounting up. When the exchange rate is mounting up, the partial benefit of the reduction in the prices of the crude oil will be nullified there. Partial. So that you will not be getting the entire benefit. There is an interesting estimate that suppose there is $1 fall in the prices, your import bill, there will be a saving of 2,700 crores of rupees in the import bill. But if there is an increase in the exchange rate by 1 rupee or 2 rupee, again your import will be increased by 2,900 crores. So you cannot find out much difference when there is increase in the exchange rate and on the other side the prices of the crude oil prices is coming down. But one point is to be noticed.
Okay.
Coming down from $70 to $20 means it's alarming.
Okay.
The central government has to seriously think of it. At least the amount they are saving from this has to be included in the package they are going to announce. That much amount can be included there. And here in Kerala, I don't think that this will be a crucial benefit for the state economy. I don't think.
Okay. So, sir, I think we missed out one important segment in Kerala. That's a traditional sectors. The traditional sectors like coir, then we have a cashew. There are a lot of people working in those sectors also. So what is your take on those sectors, sir?
And we have been talking about the revival of the traditional industries for a number of years. This is again another fate of Keralites. But however, we are not picking up. We are doing some modernization. We are doing some marketing in that areas. But the desired level of export or the desired level of sales revenue is not fetched by the entrepreneurs in that sector. And hence, definitely, I think that once our industrial sector was one of the dominant one in India because of traditional sector, the role played by the traditional sector. Now the traditional sector is not playing dominant role. This is an area where this crisis gives a lot of opportunity for Kerala. In the case of India, pharmaceutical industry gives a lot of opportunity. For Kerala, I think traditional industries can play a good role and they can increase their export to foreign countries when they pick up their growth rate. But we have to be ready for that.
Okay, so that they also expect support from the government, sir.
Definitely.
Assistance.
Definitely. Because poor people are working there, even except a few manufacturers, all in the coir sector. We don't consider cashew sector as a whole, though. Some employers are enough, they are rich enough, and we need not compensate them. But the laborers are poor laborers. They are working there in the cashew sector. Then handloom sector. Handloom sector, we have to address both the employers as well as the laborers. Some package should be announced for them. As far as laborers are concerned, I told you that they are coming under the informal laborers, and hence you need not worry if they announce a good package for the informal laborers, both the center as well as the state. But I think center will announce today or tomorrow some important package That is my expectation.
Right. So we are coming to the last few questions. One is about what is your take on investments and savings at this point of time?
And actually, one of the important aspect of this presentation is securing the livelihood of individuals. Where you have these two issues, investment and saving. I'm not talking about the investment of the state or investment of the country, but investment of the people, the households, individual households. Here there are different categories of people. One is poor people who have no saving at all. You cannot talk about saving and investment of these poor people, where the government has to announce a strong package through which direct cash transfer should be made. That is one important. Second, people have, middle income people have some amount of income, some amount of saving. They should be very cautious in spending the money. I don't mean that the people should be misers, but people should be rational consumers. Don't go for unnecessary spending. From this time onwards, you should not have more than one mobile phone. You should not have many appliances and gadgets.
I'm just adding because someone asked me, what about the consumers and consumer economy? Can I suppose to be the consumer state? So when you say don't buy mobile phones and all, I'm sure somebody is selling his phones also, right? Sir, in Kerala, who's a vendor here. So how is it going to? I mean, this one question I received now.
These two aspects will not go hand in hand. On the one hand, you are talking about the rationalization of consumption expenditure, and on the other hand, you are asking the people to buy more and more mobile phones. That will not go hand in hand.
Sir,
but I am saying that you will not get adequate money to buy 2 phones or 3 phones. Here you have to realize that fact. You have to spend money only on one mobile. Again, that has to be used wisely. That single mobile should be used wisely. Again, this is one aspect. I can talk about many other aspects, but because we have time constraints. Then another important aspect is those people who have some saving, definitely they have to maintain that money. One important aspect that you have to keep it in your mind that you should not invest the money in highly unsecured means or unsecured assets. You have to invest money in assets where you have security, safety, and with a reasonable return, not a high return. Don't go for high return this time. Reasonable return should be your strategy. And this should be the strategy of people who have some saving. Look, in the coming years, you will have loss of income. Even there may be loss of employment. And you know that, look around, you can notice that there is a reduction of cutting of the salary to the extent of 20, 25, 30%, and some factories are cutting down the percentage of laborers employed in that factory. In all these cases, what we have to do that we have to use our money wisely, because we are not sure how many years it will continue. If the pandemic is over within 6 months or 1 year, okay, you can address those issues. But if it is continued for 2 years, at least it will be continued till 2021. That is the latest estimate. Latest argument is that this will be continued till the year 2021. I doubt whether it will be. We can contain the problems of a pandemic by 2020 or 21. So whatever amount of money you have by way of saving, that should be used cleverly, wisely, rationally.
Oh, there's one more question on gold. Investing in gold. Because gold is now at the...
Investing in gold is actually always wise, but the problem is that whether it is for temporary purpose or long run purposes. If it is short run purposes, the price is very high now at this stage. When I am talking about the gold price, it is very high. There is a chance that that may be increased by 1,000 or 2,000 rupees. That will be corrected again. But when it reaches or 30,000 rupees, or now the price is somewhere around 34,800 or something like that. That when it comes back to 30,000 rupees, definitely you can invest. Always purchasing gold for a long period, sufficient long period, is recommended. Is always recommended. Okay.
Okay, sir. So, last question. We are getting questions, but I think we have to close it now. So, the last question is about, sir, the government has, this is from Professor K.C. Abraham. CM unfolded an ambitious project of maximum use of the unused fertile land for agriculture. CM said all the unused fertile land should be used for agriculture. So, what is your take on that?
If you are cultivating, you are able to cultivate the unfertile land or unused land for agricultural purposes. If it is similar to the method adopted by Japan, definitely that will be an added advantage for the state economy. But at the same time, you have to consider the ecological aspect too. But in Kerala, the present threat is sustainable development. We are not sure about the right trade-off between the growth and the environmental sustainability. This issue we are totally ignoring. And whenever we go for the development of the protective sector, this point is very noteworthy for Kerala. Because environmentally we have a lot of problems in the Kerala economy. So sustainable development should be taken into account. And if it is worthwhile to accommodate in the sustainable development, definitely you can go with that, utilizing the unused land for the agricultural purposes.
Okay. So with that, we are closing this first in the conversation series that CM going to come up with various relevant contemporary topics. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mati sir, for your and thank you for all questions. And if you like the conversation, please share it with us. If you have any feedback, please share it with us. I know some of the questions we couldn't take up the questions. There are so many questions lined up there. So we'll require 3-4 shows to answer all these questions that are asked. But I'm sure the coming weeks we will have more shows and more interaction.